Do you ever wonder how your phones connect to Google Maps when you're driving down the highway? Or, in the future, how a smart city will be able to dynamically change traffic signaling based on real-time traffic patterns? Or how a fireman may be able to reach someone who needs help using data that can be instantly pulled from the cloud? For all of this, communications infrastructure, including towers, fiber, data centers, and increasingly edge data centers and small cells are needed. And that brings us here to Statesboro, Georgia, at one of the first Access Edge deployments in the United States. Today we're going to be doing a tour of a single location, which includes a macro tower owned by Vertical Bridge, one of the largest tower operators in the United States, and a micro modular edge container owned by Edge Presence, one of a handful of companies currently building out the Access Edge, to better understand one of the ways in which edge infrastructure is being deployed and used today. The word edge gets used quite a bit these days in telecom and IT to describe a lot of different things, and in fairness, none of them are wrong. That's because the edge is more a concept than an explicit definition, since what the edge is will differ depending on the use case and the edge resources it requires. Ultimately, the edge will augment the current architecture or topology of the internet so that it becomes more distributed, so that compute and storage can move closer to where the origin data is located, a concept known as data gravity. This will be done to reduce latency, increase throughput, and lower cost. While each application and use case will have its own unique requirements, the physical locations that make up the edge are becoming more standardized, thanks in part to a project by the Linux Foundation called State of the Edge. One of the more commonly thought of edge locations is the Access Edge, and that could be a location such as that at the base of a tower, like this one. Today we're going to be meeting with Bernard Borgai, the EVP of Operations and co-founder of Vertical Bridge, and Doug Recker, the CEO and founder of Edge Presence, to show us around the site. Guys, thanks so much for having us.
Hi, Kobe. Good to have you here.
Good to see you, my friend.
Before we go in, Bernard, can you tell us, when was this site built and why was this site selected?
This site was built by one of the national operators back in the fall of 2011 and subsequently acquired by Vertical Bridge in 2014. Judging by its location and the proximity of all the other sites around this area, and knowing that there's the main highway that's going by this location and this shopping center and the residential areas on the other side, this site was designed to be a coverage providing site for that carrier. And today it continues to be a coverage providing site as well.
Got it. And how much does it typically cost for a site like this to be built?
Great question. So back in 2011, this site probably cost about $230,000 to $150,000. 10 years forward, it's probably looking at $280,000 to $300,000 now.
Wow, okay. And Doug, I guess similarly, how did you select this site for your container, and when was the container actually put in?
This actual container was dropped last October, and we went live in January. That means the network is connected and we can bring customers in. Statesboro for us was a great market because you have over 25,000 students with Georgia Southern right down the street. Tons of activity, tons of data being consumed, and it's a perfect market for us.
Great.
Ready to go in, take a tour?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it.
Bernard, one of the most important parts about a tower is the antenna array. Can you tell us what an antenna array is?
Be happy to. So as you can see here, we have two different platforms. One of them is at 100 foot, and the other one is 10 feet below it at 90 feet. And the antenna array is basically the three-sectorized platform here, as you can see. And depending on the RF design of each carrier, you can have anywhere between 2, 3, 4 to 5 panel antennas on each sector. Now, 3 sector will give you the 360-degree coverage of the site. And with the LTE deployment and 5G deployments, you now have the RRUs, which is the remote radio unit heads, and also the electronic tilt equipment at the platform of the antenna as well, either a side or to the back of the antenna. But when they refer to an antenna array, is basically the number of panels that you see on each face with all the 3 sectors involved.
And in this tower, the RRUs are actually up there on the tower.
Yeah, so with the deployment of LTE, in order to enhance what is called the link budget, which is the signal loss and the uplink and downlink, the industry started moving the actual radios up the tower in order to reduce the distance and the cable runs and reduce the signal loss. So this is the shelter for one of the carriers who's installed here. Their radio equipment, aside from the RRUs that's on top of the antenna, is housed in here, along with their battery backup and the electronics that make the basically communication between the antenna and the mobile handset work. As you can see, the cables are coming out of the shelter. They're protected by the ice bridge. They run through this port, go up the tower, and connect to the antenna array on top. This is an example of a shelter design installation of a carrier. Now, right behind us is an outdoor installation where they don't utilize a shelter like this, but they're utilizing an outdoor unit. Basically the same concept as what you would find electronic-wise inside the shelter. All the batteries and the radios, except for the RRUs, are here housed in these cabinets, still running the cables, being protected by their ice bridge, utilizing an opening port in the tower, and connecting to their antenna array on top.
And Bernard, I think one of the last things that's important then to take a look at is going to be the connectivity. Ultimately, where does the fiber come into the site? Because that's obviously needed to get the data that's collected from the site to wherever it needs to go.
Every site that we have, we bring power and fiber into the compound using conduits. And we demarcate at a location like this one in our compound. And every carrier from here will use underground conduit to connect power and fiber to their shelter or outdoor equipment.
Well, this seems like a perfect segue for me to go and talk to Doug now about the edge container that they have deployed here. Bernard, thank you so much for your time.
Good to see you. Thank you.
So Doug, we just got done looking at some of the key elements that make up the tower. We looked at the antenna array, we looked at the shelter, which is where some of the ancillary equipment is being housed, and ultimately we looked at the fiber and how that plays a part as part of the overall facility. How does your edge container integrate either with Vertical Bridges equipment or with actually that of the customers that are actually sitting on top of their tower?
Great question. So when we drop a pod, say in this Vertical Bridge site here, traditionally there's one fiber carrier coming in servicing the tower. So you'll have AT&T or T-Mobile or other carriers on the tower that basically have one way out, and they don't have multiple options on redundancy or anything. So when we drop our pod here, what happens is we bring our network in here, we tie it back to the closest carrier hotel, we basically bring those carriers here. So now the tower and all the tenants can actually come up to our fiber and co-locate inside our shelter and choose from multiple networks to get out and can peer.
Can we actually go inside the container?
Absolutely, let me take you inside.
Great. So Doug, as we were just walking in here, I could tell that there's a lot of security, which is obviously a key component of any data center. Can you talk about some of the security features that are part of this facility?
Absolutely, a great question. And that's the key to these facilities, security, because they're unmanned and they're in the middle of nowhere sometimes. So basically when you come into this facility, we have a patent pending man trap. So that gives us the auditing standard so we know who comes and goes. Cameras all over the facility. Every inch of this building is covered on cameras.
Oh, that's amazing. And then as we kind of look at the rest of the facility, it feels and looks a lot like a data center. You have the cabinets, you have the overhead trays. Just talk a little bit about what we're actually looking at here.
Yes, you're absolutely right. This is just a basic data center, just like a big brick and mortar. So you have your cabinets, you have your PDUs, you have your UPS systems, everything is N+1 in this facility, just like a big brick and mortar.
Wow, that's amazing. And I guess from a power capacity, how much power does this facility actually support? And on a cabinet basis, can you break that down for us?
So basically, this is one of our smaller shelters. This is basically 8 usable cabinets for our customers. And the average right now is around 3 kW. So that's lower use, lower burn of power for our retail customers. Now, some customers require more power, and we can manage the power per cabinet.
Right, you would just shrink the number of cabinets to which you're using and dedicate more power to the cabinets to which you are using.
Correct.
And you also mentioned or implied that you have bigger facilities that are coming online now too, is that correct?
Correct. So the bigger facilities are up to 100 kW, more load per cabinet. And what we're seeing as we go into bigger markets, there's more power need. And different types of customers are coming in now.
And I guess from a customer perspective, I know you can't mention the names of the customers that you have here, but how many customers do you already have deployed? And what are some of the use cases or needs that you're seeing for edge deployments today?
Great, yes. So it's interesting is when we deployed this shelter first, we actually had carriers come in. So paying customers. So we have a large fiber optic carrier that's in this market that is connected everywhere in town. So those are the types of customers that we want to get right away to anchor this kind of product so we can actually get to all the retail customers around here. So them, and then anywhere from a small dentist office down the street to the university is a potential client, to retail, even the big retail center right here where we're sitting the pod right now.
What about some of the cloud providers? Because the way I've thought about it, and I'm just making up names, not saying that they're customers, is someone like an AWS as an example would want to have some type of infrastructure in this facility. Are you seeing that type of demand today?
We're actually starting to field those types of calls. And actually, this is a perfect scenario for a customer like that because we're actually in the market. We're close to the eyeballs. We're close to the actual usage. And this market's perfect.
And to that point, you think about Statesboro, there probably isn't a real data center to itself that's in this market. You'd have to go to an Atlanta or maybe even to a Jacksonville. I would assume that that's part of the value of having this container, this facility in this market.
That's exactly right. So we are letting the customers and retail customers that are in Statesboro feel like they're in Atlanta, Georgia. So we're bringing a data center to their market that normally wouldn't justify a $50 million build.
Excellent. Well, Doug, thank you so much for showing us this container. Really appreciate it. It definitely gives me a better sense of what the physical edge actually is looking like.
Thank you so much.
Well, hopefully this gives you a sense for some of the infrastructure that makes up the edge, which is really still in its infancy. And as Doug alluded, over the next several years, we see the opportunity to see hundreds, if not thousands of these facilities being built, and that's just in the United States. And as we mentioned in our Living on the Edge Ahead of the Curve report last year, we see the potential for edge computing to follow paths similar to cloud computing, meaning that we see the opportunity for exponential growth as the low latency benefits associated with emerging autonomous technologies require cloud computing scale at the edge. And as we mentioned in that same report, we see the opportunity for the market to surpass the $100 billion threshold sometime over the next decade. Thanks for joining us.